Tonight, the devastation after one of Indonesia's most active volcanoes erupted. Residents saying, at first I thought it was a bomb explosion. Suddenly it was all dark like it was going to destroy the earth. Tonight, at least 22 people have died, dozens more are missing, and thousands are displaced. Roughly 3,000 homes have been damaged. The eruption on Indonesia's largest island, Java, which is also home to Jakarta. Tonight, the largest city in America with a first-of-its-kind vaccine mandate. This as COVID cases begin to surge after the Thanksgiving holiday. The U.S. is now averaging more than 100,000 cases a day for the first time in 2 months. And while concern over the Omicron variant remains, right now nearly all new cases are linked to the Delta variant, and those new guidelines for international travelers now in effect. What this means if you're leaving the country this holiday season. Tonight, major tension between the U.S. and Russia. Russian troops now building along the Ukraine border, and concerns growing about a potential invasion. The warning tonight from the White House ahead of a high-stakes call between Biden and Vladimir Putin. Tonight, the major announcement about the case that helped ignite the civil rights movement, the murder of 14-year-old Emmett Till in Mississippi. What the DOJ just revealed 66 years after his death. Tragedy on the track. The controversial Kentucky Derby winner Medina Spirit suddenly dies after a workout. Tonight, the winter blast making its way across the country. Snow, high winds, thunderstorms, and in Hawaii, catastrophic flooding concerns. Multiple feet of rain expected in some places. Our Ginger Z times it all out for us. And tonight, more proof art is in the eye of the beholder. Our report on the digital art craze. Could the next Picasso or Van Gogh come from an NFT creator?
To be honest, for an artist, our dream, anyone creative, is that we can share our work with as many people as possible. We have a community that is in over 80 countries.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Tonight, we begin in a small town thousands of miles away from us here in America. Avdiivka is 5,016 miles from New York City, to be exact, in far eastern Ukraine, far closer to Russia than Ukraine's capital of Kiev. But what happens on the frozen front lines in eastern Ukraine in the coming days could affect us all. This is ground zero for what the international community is hoping will not become a major global conflict. Satellite images show more than 100,000 Russian troops building near eastern Ukraine, and tonight the White House is firing back, warning Russia if it in fact invades Ukraine, the U.S. will send troops and supplies to meet the threat. All of this comes ahead of an incredibly high-stakes call between President Biden and Vladimir Putin. Our senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell leads us off tonight from the front lines in eastern Ukraine.
Tonight, the White House with a striking warning to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Invade Ukraine and we will respond. A senior administration official even hinting more U.S. forces could be deployed to Eastern Europe, saying, in the event of an invasion, the need to reinforce the confidence and reassurance of our NATO allies and our Eastern flank allies would be real, and the United States would be prepared to provide that kind of reassurance. The White House and NATO allies looking at a range of other options.
We've consulted significantly with our allies and believe we have a path forward that would impose significant and severe harm on the Russian economy.
The escalating tensions centre on this frozen landscape in eastern Ukraine, with Russian-backed rebels on one side and Ukrainian troops on the other. This is the front line.
The scars from this conflict are everywhere across eastern Ukraine. You can see bombed-out buildings, thousands of residents forced to flee their homes. Although there's supposed to be a peace agreement here, artillery shells are constantly being swapped by both sides, and every few minutes we're still hearing the sound of small arms fire.
Today, as many as 100,000 Russian combat troops are thought to be massed on the border near here, the US fearing they could be preparing for a full-scale military assault into Ukraine. US officials claiming the Kremlin might be planning a multi-front offensive in the new year, involving as many as 175,000 troops, along with artillery and other equipment. Russia invaded here almost 8 years ago, and the White House is determined not to let it happen again. But they depend on soldiers like Lieutenant Colonel Yaroslav Melnichuk, one of the officers standing on the front line.
With
the first line of defence, he says, between civilization and some kind of empire that wants to pull us back. We are ready.
They say they are ready to go. Ian Pannell joins us now from near the border in eastern Ukraine. Ian, you noted that warning from the White House today if Russia takes any action against Ukraine. So what actions can the U.S. take that would actually have some teeth to deter Putin from an incursion into Ukraine?
I think a lot of attention has focused on the potential for some kind of U.S. troop deployment into Eastern Europe. These are likely to be NATO members. That is only if it's something that those member states request. There's been a lot of attention focused on that, but I don't think it's likely that we're going to see U.S. troops deployed here in Ukraine if Russia plans to cross over the border. I don't think NATO really wants to get into a toe-to-toe fight with Russia. I think what's more likely to hurt Russia, the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin, is the threat of economic sanctions. We're told that these will be very severe. They will have real consequences. In many ways, some of the sanctions that have been imposed in the past, they've had an effect on the country, but not to a disastrous level. They're perfectly capable of targeting the international banking system that Russia, like other countries, relies upon, and that could have devastating consequences. That would really hurt the Kremlin. But how does Vladimir Putin respond to those kinds of threats? I think it's going to be a very, very difficult phone conversation between the two men.
And what are you seeing on the ground there of Russia's presence on the border, and how are Ukrainian officials reacting to this buildup?
Yeah, we've seen those satellite images. There doesn't seem to be any doubt that there's been this significant buildup of Russian troops. U.S. officials are saying around 70,000, Ukrainian officials putting it closer to 100,000. That's on the Russian side of the border with eastern Ukraine. The place where we were today is on this sort of de facto border, the front line, if you like, between the separatist, rebel-held, Russian-backed part of the country and the Ukrainian-controlled part of the country. And although there was a peace agreement almost 8 years ago, this is still a very active conflict. There are thousands, tens of thousands of people who fled their homes who still haven't been able to go back. Every day or two, there is an exchange of either small arms fire, sometimes even artillery. And it's kind of curious to feel that you're on the eastern fringes of Europe, and yet this conflict is still bubbling away, largely ignored by the outside world, and to a large extent, largely ignored by many Ukrainians who've learned to live with it. Many of them aren't, at this moment, it feels to me, living in dread of an imminent Russian invasion. But should it happen, undoubtedly, it would be catastrophic. Lindsay?
And people at this point do seem to be paying attention. Ian Pannell, our thanks to you. Cecilia Vega joins us now from the White House. Russia's downplaying tomorrow's video call between Biden and Putin. But what are White House officials saying today on what's truly at stake in this call and the message that the president hopes to convey?
Yeah, Lindsay, the White House and officials here are basically saying that President Biden is going to send this message to Vladimir Putin. Don't even go there when it comes to invading Ukraine or the idea of invading Ukraine. And they say they don't believe their intelligence shows that he has made up his mind as to whether this is something he's actually going to do. The White House does not want conflict with Russia. They are making that crystal clear. But they are saying, look, if President Putin decides to make this step and invade Ukraine, if American allies in Europe, NATO allies specifically, ask for American assistance, they will comply, and that could mean sending troops to the region. As it stands right now, President Biden will not say what his red line is, but all options are on the table right now, Lindsay, including severe sanctions.
And at the same time, also some tensions today between the U.S. and China after the White House announced a diplomatic boycott of the upcoming Winter Olympic Games in China. Explain what that means and why the U.S. is taking this action.
Well, basically what this means is there will not be an official delegation going to Beijing to watch these games. That means people like President Biden, First Lady here, no U.S. officials for that matter will be going. What it also means, though, is that American athletes will continue to go and play in these games. The White House says they didn't want to pull athletes who have been spending their entire lives training from these games, but they want to send a message to Beijing over human rights abuses, cracking down on pro-democracy protesters and activists there, cracking down on ethnic Muslims in this country, that it is not business as usual, so they are not sending this American delegation to these games. We haven't seen this, Lindsay, since 1980, but at that time, President Carter, he went much further. Not even athletes were allowed to go. That was to the Moscow Games over the Soviets' invasion of Afghanistan at the time.
Yeah, this one a little bit more symbolic. Cecilia Vega reporting in from the White House for us. Thanks, Cecilia. Now to the pandemic, and the concern tonight is cases have topped 100,000 per day for the first time in 2 months. While many are rushing out to get vaccines or boosters over concerns about the Omicron variant, the major worry tonight remains Delta and the fact that it continues to ravage unvaccinated pockets of America. This comes as America's largest city announced a first-of-its-kind vaccine mandate today. Stephanie Ramos reports.
Facing a COVID surge, driving cases up 27% across the country in the last week, along with the looming Omicron variant, New York City today expanding vaccine mandates in the nation's most sweeping plan yet, the mayor calling it a preemptive strike.
Vaccination is the central weapon in this war against COVID. It's the one thing that has worked every single time across the board.
Starting later this month, all private sector employees will have to have 1 dose of the vaccine. Children as young as 5 to 11 will now also need proof of 1 vaccine dose to enter restaurants, gyms, and entertainment venues. And anyone 12 and older will require 2 vaccine doses for all indoor activities.
New York now is really rushing this mandate like everybody now, and I just don't think that's right.
And today, a new rule going into effect for all international travelers coming into the country. Proof of a negative COVID test within 24 hours of takeoff.
There's not enough hours in the day to get a test done and be able to fly here. Had 18 and a half hours of flight time. If there's a delay or you miss a plane, then what are you going to do?
But for Elisa Long and her family, it's peace of mind.
It's like going into any business, no shirt, no shoes, no vaccine. You don't get to come in or you don't get to go travel.
The Omicron variant has now been detected in 18 states, and so far, officials have reported mild or moderate symptoms in those cases.
We really got to be careful before we make any determinations that it is less severe or really doesn't cause any severe illness comparable to Delta. But thus far, the signals are a bit encouraging regarding the severity.
The symptoms were mild for 30-year-old Peter McGinn from Minnesota, who tested positive for Omicron after returning from an anime convention in New York last month. He was fully vaccinated with a booster and was surprised.
I was just a little taken back to the fact that I, A, had COVID, and B, it was the new one.
McGinn suspects he was infected not at the convention, but when he and a group of about 30 people who were also vaccinated socialized without masks. Now, half of that group has tested positive for COVID.
I felt perfectly safe with the people that I was with, and so it never really crossed my mind to think that I had COVID. So it was more like those events outside of the con where I believe that the transmission took place.
And new details tonight on that cruise ship that docked in New Orleans. Health officials suspect another case of Omicron in a South African crew member. Before disembarking, another 16 of the 3,200 fully vaccinated guests and crew on board also testing positive for COVID.
Last night about 7, they said everybody's got to be tested all of a sudden. We all have to be tested, and they were making us all go. We were in the middle of our dinners, shows, everything.
Urgency right in the middle of everything. Stephanie Ramos joins us now. Stephanie, the military tonight, they're sending more medical teams to support healthcare workers in hard-hit states.
Right, Lindsay. Medical teams from the Army, Air Force, and Navy will be heading to Colorado, New Mexico, and Michigan. They'll include nurses, doctors, respiratory therapists, and they will be in position to support those on the front lines by the end of this week. Lindsay.
Stephanie Ramos, our thanks to you. Dramatic developments over the weekend in the case against that teen high school shooter in Michigan. His parents charged and arrested. This as more accounts of the horrific shooting continue to surface. ABC's Trevor Ault has this report.
Tonight, the Crumbly family behind bars in the same Michigan jail. All 3 held separately in isolation on precautionary suicide watch. James and Jennifer Crumbly arrested over the weekend inside this empty Detroit commercial building after an hours-long manhunt.
4 children were murdered.
The couple facing 4 counts each of involuntary manslaughter. Prosecutors saying they bought the gun used in the shooting for their son on Black Friday. The 15-year-old now charged with killing 4 classmates and injuring 7 others, all 3 pleading not guilty.
Not guilty.
And tonight, questions about the school's actions leading up to the shooting. Prosecutors claim that morning a teacher reported the suspect drew a disturbing picture with a person appearing shot and phrases like blood everywhere. The superintendent says the teen claimed the drawing was for a video game he was designing and appeared calm. His parents refused to take him home, and given he had no prior disciplinary infractions, he was returned to class. The superintendent now calling for a third-party investigation and the Michigan Attorney General offering to conduct it as the prosecutor is not ruling out further charges.
We all should be looking at the events that led up to that horrific event. And in this case, a lot could have been done different.
And tonight we're hearing from Dylan Morris, a student who barricaded in a classroom during the rampage, and his anger is directed at the shooter.
I want justice to be served. I believe it's every student in Oxford, every parent in Oxford, teacher wants justice to be served.
Yeah, so many asking for, even demanding justice here. Trevor Ault joins us again from the jail in Michigan where these parents and their son are all being held in separate cells. And Trevor, there's some debate tonight about whether the gun used in the shooting was kept locked or unlocked.
Yeah, that's right, Lindsay. So the prosecutor had previously alleged that this weapon that was used in the shooting was kept unlocked in the Crumbly's bedroom, which the Crumbly's attorneys vehemently disputed at their arraignment. And today, the prosecutor actually backpedaled a little bit on that fact. She now says she's not positive it was kept unlocked, but she also says that it doesn't matter. She says the Crumblys clearly bought this weapon for their son, the alleged shooter, and he obviously could access it because he used it to carry out the shooting. Lindsay?
Trevor Ault, our thanks to you. Former CNN anchor Chris Cuomo announced today he is leaving his SiriusXM radio show. This comes after he was fired by CNN over the weekend after a former co-worker came forward accusing him of sexual misconduct. He was already suspended indefinitely at the time for helping his brother, the former New York governor, battle sexual assault allegations. Cuomo says, while I have a thick skin, I also have a family for whom the past week has been extraordinarily difficult. So right now I have to take a step back and focus on what comes next. Tonight, a cold blast is making its way across the country, and with it, snow, winds, and strong thunderstorms. Our chief meteorologist, Ginger Z, is tracking it all for us. Good evening to you, Ginger.
Good evening to you, Lindsay. If you ever wanted to feel a cold front, I urge you to step outside. It's passing now. That's why we are so breezy, but it is windy and downright almost dangerous where we have wind advisories in place tonight. Gusts could go up to 50 miles per hour anywhere you see they're shaded in browns. The mid-Atlantic from Baltimore to Washington, D.C., much of western New York, so from Buffalo over to, say, Syracuse, and then into Bar Harbor. So that wind advisory is there. The winter weather advisories for West Michigan, that's because you're kicking up a lot of lake effect snow, so that could make a lot of road issues, especially in western New York as well. Once this front passes, we are going to see a significant temperature drop. We're going to see temps feel like they're 23 in Cincinnati, 8 in Chicago tomorrow morning, and yes, you do see a 7 below in Fargo on the map. So we will feel sub-freezing along the I-95 corridor, but when we look at the extended forecast, wow, is this above average? The CPC, or the Climate Prediction Center, has not put out that likely above average, that deep dark red in that large of an area since 2014. Lindsay.
Oh, wow. And Ginger, tonight, Hawaii is facing the prospect of some catastrophic flooding there as relentless pounds of rain pummel the island. More than a foot of rain in some places. What are your biggest concerns there tonight?
When we were looking at rainfall rates earlier this morning, we were looking at 1 to 3 inch per hour, which is a lot, and that can cause mudslide debris flow. The last flash flood warning for Oahu said 3 to 4 inch per hour rainfall rates. That is just water inundating and pouring from the sky. You can see it's almost like a snake on the radar there, heading straight for the heavy and some of the higher populations. And that's what we're concerned with in the coming hours and even early tomorrow. Then we will start to see things dry out. But until then, it could be devastating. Lindsay.
All right, Ginger Z, our thanks to you.
Thank you.
And when we come back, the daughter accused of living with her mother's dead corpse for months. Why police say she did it. You may have heard about the explosion in NFTs, but how does that intersect with the real art world? Our team just got back from Art Basel down in Miami, brings us their report. But up next, the FBI closes its investigation into the events surrounding Emmett Till's death. What prosecutors revealed as we speak with some of his relatives. Next.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
It was a scary time.
In the 70s, you had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it, serial killer.
There was a human head in there.
This was premeditated evil.
You have this clock. This person is going to do this again.
It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it.
Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I risked my life. I put my family in danger. If I was caught, they would have put a bullet in my head. But it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do.
Terror plot foiled in Garden City, Kansas.
That would have been one of the most deadly acts of domestic terrorism ever in the United States.
It would have been Oklahoma City.
He put his family, himself, in jeopardy for us.
24 hours, Assault on the Capitol, the ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu, now streaming. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
National parks are incredibly safe places, but crime will happen.
Hey, my wife has fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
Sunday morning, about 2:30, I heard a voice at the door, and I asked who was it, and they said, "This is Mr. Bryant. I want to talk with you and the boy." And when I opened the door, there was a man standing with a pistol in one hand and a flashlight in the other.
And they entered my room with the flashlight, so the flashlight shines, and I could see the big bald-headed guy with the pistol in it. And I'm waiting to be shot, and I closed my eyes. And I wasn't shot. I opened my eyes, and they're passing by me because they were looking for Fat Boy, the fat boy from Chicago.
They went to the next room and found Simeon and Emmett, and they told him to get up. And he got up, and he was putting on his shoes, and they said, "Hurry up." And he said, "I'm not used to putting on my shoes without my socks."
Ryan was not the leader. His half-brother, J.W. Mylan, was in control. He was running it, taking care of his little brother and showing him how he's supposed to be an expert in handling people that got out of line. So he did it in the military. My grandfather tried to tell them don't take him. The boy didn't have good sense or something of that nature. My grandmother offered them money.
And they marched him to the car, and he drove toward money.
And that's the last time we saw him.
He said, "I think about the look in Emmett's eye when they took him out of that house, and nobody said a word." He said, I wonder what he was thinking. And that's a burden that he carries.
At times I've wondered, why didn't they put up a fight? But they couldn't. What could they have done? I think about the young woman who recorded George Floyd's death. And the death threats she's gotten just from standing there with a phone. So when I think of Emmett and his family, it's the same thing. In that moment, if they had not complied, they could have all been killed.
I stayed right there in that room. Only person that was awake beside me was Simeon. He never left his room. No one said anything. Absolutely, it was just quiet as a church mouse, so to speak.
Then the call came. Emmett's body had been found.
And made me start crying and yelling, and we didn't know what had happened.
The grief in the house, the sadness in the house was horrible. The screaming, the disbelief.
Mamie was just devastated. It was hard to see her heart broken.
But she had to pull herself together because she had to get the mechanisms in place to bring him back to Chicago.
Now, the Tallahatchie County Sheriff, H.C. Strider, orders that Emmett's body be buried immediately before the sun sets that day. The grave is actually being dug when Mamie gets the information that they're about to bury her son in Mississippi.
First of all, why is the sheriff even making that decision? When have you heard of a sheriff deciding that the body should be buried? There's something really that they're trying to hide here. For his mom, that was an immediate red flag. She set off a domino effect.
Miss Mamie began to call everybody she knew. She called the governor, she called Mayor Daley, she called everybody she could touch, and finally got them engaged to bring the child home.
The stopping of the burial came from Illinois. Chicago Mayor Daley, who had just become a mayor, they stepped up and got that stopped.
The same train that took Emmett down, the City of New Orleans train, brought his remains back to Chicago.
That preview of the ABC News Studios docuseries Let the World See, which is produced in association with Jay-Z's Rock Nation, Will Smith's Westbrook Studios, and Capitol Entertainment. The series tells the story of Mamie Till Mobley, the mother of Emmett Till, and her fight to seek justice in the brutal death of her son. The special limited docuseries premiering January 6th at 10 p.m. Eastern on ABC. Earlier today, the Justice Department announced that after 66 years, the investigation into Till's death has officially closed without any federal prosecution after failing to prove a key witness lied. Joining us now are two cousins of Till who met with the FBI today, Reverend Wheeler Parker Jr. and Ollie Gordon. We thank you so much for joining us tonight. We know that this was certainly a difficult day, not the outcome that you were looking for. When the FBI told you that they were going to hold a press conference and make an announcement, what did you initially think that you would hear, Ms. Gordon?
I thought that I would hear exactly what I heard, is that there was not sufficient evidence to bring new charges, and therefore the case would be closed with no new information found.
And Reverend Parker, how do you think that Mamie would respond to today's announcement?
Having listened to her previous prior speeches, she was okay. She said that they were just about out of her mind. They were not controlling her, and God took hate out of her life shortly after that happened, and she took the lemon and she made lemonade, that's the term I use, and she was busy serving. We were put here on earth to serve, help one another, and that's what she did. Of course, she hated the idea that her only son she lost, but she just wanted people to remember him in a positive way, and that's what she asked us to do, carry on the legacy and spend our time not hating. She said God took hate out of her life, and I tell people I can't afford the luxury of hate because hate destroys the hater, and we both were on the same page when it came to that. So she, both of us being from the same religious denomination, we are taught to pray for our enemies and those who despitefully use us, and we have the right attitude, and that's what she would have now. She would be, we were painfully, when we think about his death and how he suffered, we have pain, of course, but it's 90% of how you handle that pain.
Is there pain, though, when you think that no one will answer for his death, even 66 years later?
Well, this is the way we look at it, and we real about this. She said it, and I said the same thing. God said, vengeance is mine. I know no one goes without punishment or paying for what they've done. I have reaped what I sowed, and it's not a good thing, and it's hurt, and you're gonna pay exactly. And when the guy did Emmett's funeral, that's what he said. God said, vengeance is mine. So we carry that, we go with that. We don't have to see someone suffer, and we don't get any glory, and you have to be careful as a Christian. You can't get any glory out of even people getting what they deserve. And so she had a good attitude about it, and I do too.
And Ms. Gordon, do you think that the result of the Emmett Till murder trial would have been the same if it had been held today? Obviously, decades ago, both white men were found not guilty by an all-white jury.
I think that the outcome might have been different based on the laws that we have today that we did not have in 1955. We didn't have any hate crime laws. I think it might have been different looking at the outcome of the last two cases with George Floyd and there was one other I can't recall off the top of my head, but I think it would have been
most recently.
Yes. Right, right. That one, and that one especially. I think had Emmett been killed back in today's time, I think that might have been a different outcome, a different verdict, because the world has moved forward and they are looking at the activities and the hate, and they see how it's destroying not a community but a country. And it's you know, each day we look and we see these crimes still being committed, even ones that we don't hear about. But I think that they're knowing that people can be brought to trial now, they can be tried, and there can be consequences for their behavior. It makes them think twice.
And Ms. Gordon, we heard just a moment ago from Reverend Parker and his wife also quoting that scripture, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. How does faith bring you through all of this? How does God and religion help you process this?
Well, you know, I pray a lot, and he helps me process it because in some way, I can see things differently, and the pain is somewhat numbed, but it never really goes away. Each time I see a picture of Emmett's mother, and I see the tears, and I feel her pain, it's almost as if though I'm a part of her, I'm an extension of her. But I do understand that vengeance shall be mine means many things, even though they were not convicted in the courts that man created. They are still having to live and be judged with our Creator, God. And even though we may not know, but I am sure that there have been suffering and pain and regret in their lives ever since this particular atrocity occurred. And I did learn that Carolyn Bryant also lost a child, a son. So I think in that case, too, she was able to feel the pain that Emmett's mother felt, maybe not at the depth because he wasn't lynched in the manner in which Emmett was, but she knows the pain and she knows the emptiness of losing a child.
Obviously, it doesn't hurt any less to think about losing your cousin, but do you believe that Emmett has had a larger impact in death than he might have had in life?
I do. I know so. His mother used to say that he was born to be the sacrificial lamb, and that was his purpose. He had to meet his death in order for change to come in the world. That sparked the civil rights movement, and from that we got a lot more justice and a lot more privilege than we would have had, or even that we had in 1955. And things are still changing, and each time something changes or there's another killing or a murder, Emmett's name comes up. So in that aspect, yes, he has had an effect, and he's still having an effect, and I think that he will for the years to come. You know, my question is now, we're at this impasse, so where do we go from here, and how do we get there?
Reverend Parker, Ms. Gordon, we thank you so much for talking with us tonight. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Timothy Tyson, the author of the book, tells ABC News that he stands by his account, saying that, quote, only days after Emmett Till's body was found, Carolyn Bryant Donham told her own attorney her story, but did not mention any physical contact, which she described in court as more or less a rape attempt. Tyson says that she told him that part's not true. ABC News also spoke to a family member of Carolyn Bryant Donham who told ABC News she is, quote, glad it's done. Still ahead here on Prime, more members of that American missionary group held captive in Haiti for $1 million ransom each have been freed. What we're now learning. Actor Jussie Smollett takes the stand years after he was accused of lying to police about being the victim of an alleged hate crime. And we take a look at the diplomatic boycott against the Beijing Winter Olympics by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day, courtesy of NASA. Meet the astronaut class of 2021. Or you can just go to space like our colleague Michael Strahan later on this week. More on that later in the show.
Alec Baldwin made news when he spoke out for the first time. And now, Friday night.
Why was Alec Baldwin handed a gun with live ammunition?
This bullet goes off.
Then there was a scream.
Oh my God.
I was told I was handed an empty gun. Who is to blame?
Why do shocking tragedies keep happening on movie sets?
After the shock, I became angry. Someone losing their life again.
New reporting, new details. The new 2020 event special, Friday night on ABC.
It was a scary time. In the 70s, you had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it, serial killer.
There was a human head in there. This was premeditated evil.
We have this clock. This person is going to do this again.
It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
World News Now.
And America This Morning.
The best new video.
The breaking news overnight.
Emergency crews called to the town of Surfside.
U.S. airstrikes hitting targets in Iraq and Syria.
The stories people are talking about.
You don't want to shave your legs? Don't. I was going to say.
Oh my. Got it.
And what to expect in the day ahead.
ABC World News Now and America This Morning.
Starting at 2 a.m. Eastern.
Up all night to keep you up to date.
This holiday season, after all we've been through, who couldn't use a little extra joy, smiles, and some incredible free gifts? Yes, that's why GMA is giving back this December. Giving back to you, our GMA family. Every morning, watch GMA, and when you see the QR code, scan it for your chance to win incredible gifts selected by Tori, and even get a $200 gift card too. This holiday season, GMA gives back to you.
Is that the gun?
That's not the gun.
What is it? I won't ask you again then.
Are you a Nazi?
The deeper you go into the black markets,
you put people to your life at risk.
the darker it gets.
Why hasn't anyone come out and spoken?
It's about the money. That's why we do it.
Trafficked. New episodes Wednesdays at 9 on National Geographic.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run with...
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Welcome back, everyone. We are less than 3 months until the start of the Winter Olympics in Beijing, China. And as we mentioned earlier, the White House today announced a diplomatic boycott as tensions with the repressive communist country escalate. Let's take a look by the numbers. When the Olympic torch is officially lit in 59 days to kick off the 2022 Beijing Olympics, it seems all but certain top U.S. officials will not be there. Olympic Games are an opportunity, of course, for the world to come together. 92 nations participated in the last Winter Olympics in South Korea. But the 16-day event is also an opportunity for countries on the world stage to air grievances with each other. The Biden administration has been pressured for weeks to diplomatically boycott because of China's human rights record, including what many call a genocide against Muslims in China. Boycotts have happened before, of course, notably in 1980, President Carter led 65 countries in boycotting the Moscow Olympics after the Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan a year earlier. 4 years later, 14 countries participated in a Soviet-led boycott of the Games in Los Angeles. Right now, this would just be a diplomatic boycott, meaning athletes would still attend. At least 3 other countries, Canada, Australia, and the UK, are also considering similar action. Today, the White House said, "We will be 100% behind Team USA as we cheer them on from home." And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. The investigation now launched after Kentucky Derby winner Medina Spirit collapses and dies. And the $825 calendar from Chanel, the saga that ensued. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
It's an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new hunt wherever you get your podcasts.
ABC News honored winner of 9 Edward R. Murrow Awards, more than any other network, including winning for the 3rd straight year the award for overall excellence in television. ABC News is America's #1 news source.
National parks are incredibly safe places. A crime will happen.
Hey, my wife has fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
I risked my life. I put my family in danger. If I was caught, they would have put a bullet in my head. But it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do.
Terror plot foiled in Garden City, Kansas.
That would have been one of the most deadly acts of domestic terrorism ever in the United States. It would have been Oklahoma City.
He put his family, himself, in jeopardy for us.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart that he did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move out. Let's move out.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run with...
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
With the Omicron variant advancing across several states and countries, top health officials now on alert.
We are every day hearing about more and more probable cases, so that number is likely to rise.
While Omicron is confirmed in at least 17 states, it's the Delta variant that's been around for months that makes up 99.9% of all new cases, with surges happening in states like Minnesota and Michigan, where hospitals are overwhelmed. In New York City, the mayor looking to get ahead of a holiday spike, announcing a sweeping vaccine mandate for all private employers with a deadline of December 27th.
We have the tools, but we have to use those tools aggressively.
As Omicron and Delta fuel concerns of a dual strain surge, health experts urging Americans to get their booster shots.
Kentucky Derby winner Medina Spirit died suddenly after a workout this morning in Santa Anita. The 3-year-old colt, trained by Bob Baffert, had just completed a training session when he collapsed. The Kentucky Horse Racing Commission says a full investigation is now underway.
Medina Spirit was a focus of controversy after the horse tested positive for a steroid after winning the Derby. Follow-up tests showed it was from a topical ointment, apparently for a skin condition and not an injection.
Actor Jesse Smollett took the witness stand today in his own defense in day 5 of his trial in Chicago. Prosecutors accuse him of staging a hate crime against himself in January of 2019 and then lying to police about it. Last week, 2 brothers testified Smollett paid them to carry out the bogus attack and to make it look like it was motivated by race and homophobia. Smollett testified today about his physical relationship with one of the brothers and their drug use together. Smollett's attorney says this was a real crime and Smollett was a real victim.
A New Hampshire woman arrested after a horrifying discovery. She was living at home with her mother's corpse for months. Police say 54-year-old Kimberly Heller's mother died just before Memorial Day in May, natural causes. Family members had requested a wellness check after not hearing from the mother for a while. Police say mother's Social Security checks continued to be deposited into her bank account in the months following her death. Heller expected to be arraigned on a charge of abusing a corpse in January. 3 more of the 17 missionaries taken hostage in Haiti are now free. Their Ohio-based missionary group, Christian Aid Ministries, announcing their release last night and saying in a statement, quote, "Those who were released are safe and seem to be in good spirits. 12 of the 17 are still in captivity." The 400 Mawazo gang leader spoke out in a video demanding $1 million in ransom for each, threatening to kill them if the demands aren't met. The State Department saying it's still working with the Haitian government and that the hostage situation is, quote, an utmost priority. Luxury brand Chanel has been roasted by some on social media over its larger-than-life advent calendar. TikTok user Elise Harmon went viral for sharing a series of unboxing videos where she details her dismay at the findings.
Okay, this has to be a joke. This is a joke.
Finding stickers and temporary tattoos among some of the items hidden inside. The video series has received tens of millions of views. Given the calendar's $825 price tag, Harmon told ABC News she was less than impressed after pulling items she didn't feel live up to the brand's prestige. That brand has since told The Guardian they're sorry if the calendar disappointed some people. It wasn't a waste, however. The calendar did have some more of Chanel's signature items, including a full-size lipstick, which she called gorgeous.
We turn now to Art Basel, Miami, a place for fine art, quirky installations, and now NFTs, a type of digital art that is all the rage. But is it hyper-actual substance? Could the next Picasso or Van Gogh come from a digital creator? ABC's Ashin Singh has more.
Art Week in Miami, Florida. Home to Art Basel Miami, the famed art fair roared back to life this year with a noticeable addition: NFTs.
Here on the convention floor, it seems like NFTs and digital art pieces are some of the most popular attractions here. It's like the high art community isn't just accepting these digital artists, they're embracing them.
NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, a type of digital art, verified unique using a ledger system through cryptocurrency. This year, one of the most crowded exhibitions, not a traditional gallery, but powered by a blockchain called Tezos, teaching guests how to make and mint their own NFTs.
All right, I'm gonna capture it, okay? So this is the unique NFT. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sign in to create a wallet, and that's gonna actually mint the NFT. Why take people back to basics and show them how to make an NFT?
One is sort of educate people about what NFTs are, educate about Tezos and its benefits, but also just to enjoy the experience and see how it feels to connect with an artist, to be able to experience this digital medium in a way that you can actually own it, share it, and it has permanence and provenance.
I caught up with Berlin-based artist Mario Klingemann, known online as Quasimondo. He created the algorithm for the exhibition.
So Mario, you're such a pioneer in the AI art world. Could you have imagined that NFTs would have had this big of a footprint at a festival like Art Basel?
Well, I can imagine a lot of things, but let's say a year ago, I probably would not have thought that.
Pace, a gallery around since the 60s, usually focuses on traditional, blue-chip art. But one of its augmented reality NFT pieces, sold before Art Basel, even opened to the public.
We definitely see the NFT market, and specifically NFTs with our artists, as an extension or a different medium for them to explore.
You guys are the tastemakers in this art world in a lot of ways. A lot of people are saying, some of the NFTs that are existing out there, they're just, all about the hype.
We've worked specifically with artists within our program who have well-founded markets within the traditional fine art world, but in some formulation have had experience within the technology sector.
And miles away from the convention floor, a familiar face is making headlines. Art Grail's gallery stirring the pot on the hype versus art debate, with exclusive Michael Cohen NFTs for sale, based on the former Trump lawyer's prison paraphernalia.
How are you beginning to draw the line, or is the line actually starting to blur between memorabilia and art?
So I look at it like the memorabilia line was always blurred from the start and inception of NFTs. And if anything, we're looking at ways of incorporating the physicality of it. For instance, the Michael Cohen NFT, whoever gets that NFT, one of them will be registered to win a lottery to get the actual ID badge.
While the numbers aren't fully in from the festival weekend quite yet, the market for NFTs isn't going anywhere. Artists like Beeple have made headlines for sales topping 69 million. At Art Miami, 50-year-old artist Brendan Murphy just cashed in, selling one piece for just over $1.1 million as part of his cult favorite venture, Bougie Project.
To be honest, for an artist, our dream, anyone creative, is that we can share our work with as many people as possible. We have a community that is in over 80 countries.
No matter what the piece represents or the subject matter, pretty much everyone here will tell you the art is what you make of it. But the NFT technology is finally allowing digital creatives and their work to receive value they've long missed out on.
The analogy is, I went from a club to playing a stadium with the help of a new platform.
For ABC News, Ashin Singh in Miami.
A whole new world out there. Our thanks to Ashin for bringing us that. Next to the preparations being made as billionaire Jeff Bezos and his company Blue Origin prepare to send the next group to space, among them our very own Michael Strahan.
It's my first full day of training here in Van Horn, Texas, and it's sure to be action-packed. First step, we'll be putting on my customized flight suit.
It's going to have your patch right there with your name on it.
Primary trainer for my flight is Kevin Spro. He and Sarah Knights work as crew member 7, trainers in capsule communications with Mission Control.
Welcome to the Astronaut Training Center.
We begin at the Blue Origin Astronaut Training Center, where I will meet my 5 fellow crewmates and find out for the first time our seating assignments inside the capsule.
We have 6 seats in the capsule. As you walk into the hatch, directly to your left is seat number 1, and it goes all the way around clockwise to seat 6. The first time they go in the capsule for their training, their name tags and patches will be on their seat, so that's when they get to see for the first time where they're going to be sitting. So this is our New Shepard astronaut seat.
A few weeks ago, I met up with Kevin Sprogue to test out my flight seat to make sure I would fit.
Oh, this is comfortable. I'm excited. I'm ready to go.
He's right at the upper limit of what we designed our seat for. I think we lucked out a little bit. Michael has really long legs, but not as long a torso, which actually helped us out. So he actually fit in our seats.
Then it's time to step inside and learn how to become a Blue Origin astronaut.
We get them comfortable with the capsule itself and the environment that they're going to be in, talking about the systems on the capsule and then the flight itself. What is the flight profile? What are the sounds that they're going to hear? What is it going to feel like? And then we start walking them through the flight.
We'll cover all of the things that they can touch and see and interact with inside of the crew capsule. We want them to be incredibly comfortable with every little thing, even to the point where they know exactly where each of the cameras is inside of the vehicle so they can plan out any photos that they want to take and get really ready for what that journey will look like as they go up.
So exciting. The countdown is on. Before we go tonight, the image of the day. These houses intact and now isolated, surrounded by lava from a volcano in La Palma, Spain, which continues its devastating run. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Coming up in the next hour, we're staying on top of a few things. We've talked about the surge in COVID cases around the world, and now with Omicron, governments are tightening restrictions once again. In the next hour, we launch our series, One World, One Pandemic. Our first trip to Germany, where COVID fatigue has taken hold. How can we defeat this pandemic when so many people seem to simply just be over it? And the medical breakthrough giving hope to people with type 1 diabetes.
T-minus, the countdown is on. Michael Strahan, liftoff, rocket to space. See it live this Thursday morning, starting on ABC's Good Morning America. Are you ready for this, Michael?
I risked my life. I put my family in danger. If I was caught, they would have put a bullet in my head. But it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do.
Terror plot foiled in Garden City, Kansas.
That would have been one of the most deadly acts of domestic terrorism ever in the United States. It would have been Oklahoma City.
He put his family, himself in jeopardy for us.
Alec Baldwin made news when he spoke out for the first time. And now, Friday night.
Why was Alec Baldwin handed a gun with live ammunition?
This bullet goes off.
Then there was a scream.
Oh my God.
I was told I was handed an empty gun. Who is to blame?
Why do shocking tragedies keep happening on movie sets?
After the shock, I became angry. Someone losing their life again.
New reporting, new details. The new 2020 event special, Friday night on ABC.
The ladies you love, the hottest topics happening now. There's only one place to find it all.
You guys are having the hard conversations. I love The View.
The most watched #1 daytime talk show is The View. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It was a scary time.
In the 70s, you had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it, serial killer.
There was a human head in there.
This was premeditated evil.
We have this clock. This person is going to do this again. It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
I'll be everything you want to. I'll be
winner of 9 Edward R. Murrow Awards, more than any other network, including winning for the 3rd straight year the award for overall excellence in television. ABC News is America's #1 news source.
Hey there, I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. The DOJ is suing Texas in an effort to block its new redistricting plan. The Justice Department claims it discriminates against Latino and Black voters. The DOJ says the state's population grew by 4 million since the last census, 95% in minority populations, yet the 2 new districts the state earned were drawn with white voting majorities. Kentucky lawmaker Representative Thomas Massey is facing backlash, but not backing down for this photo he posted to social media that shows his family holding powerful guns. The images was posted the same day the father of a teenager was arraigned on involuntary manslaughter charges after he brought his son a gun, which was used to kill 4 students at a Michigan high school. Representative Massey in his post wrote, "Merry Christmas. P.S. Santa, please bring ammo." And Omicron has now been confirmed in at least 17 states in the U.S., but the Delta variant, which has been around for months, still accounts for 99.9% of all new cases. In New York City, the mayor is trying to get ahead of a holiday spike, announcing a sweeping vaccine mandate for all private employers with a December 27th deadline. Meanwhile, new rules for international travelers returning to the U.S. that make everyone show a negative COVID test 24 hours before their flight started today. Now, a look at COVID-19 in Europe, where cases are surging, but COVID fatigue has set in, and people are taking to the streets to protest vaccine mandates and restrictions. This report is the first in the ABC News Live series, One World, One Pandemic, where we look at the latest battles against COVID across the globe. Here's ABC's James Longman.
There are 2 battles now raging across Europe. One is the quiet, relentless push against COVID. But the other is the more violent, angry response to the measures in place to stop its spread. Europe's COVID numbers are, once again, record-breaking. More than 2 years into this pandemic, and the region is seeing its highest ever number of daily cases, 1 million new infections every 3 days. With the rise in cases, an all-too-familiar sight, lockdowns, mask mandates and restrictions. But this time, the fight isn't just against the virus. Europe's leaders are now pointing to the unvaccinated. The famous Dresden Christmas market in Germany hasn't escaped the COVID ghost of Christmas past. Shut down once again because of Germany's rising case numbers.
What we see now that about 60 to 70% of the patients in hospitals are not vaccinated.
It's the latest country to announce a lockdown for the unvaccinated, saying those who refuse to get the jab will find themselves cut out from daily life. That means no restaurants, no bars, no hair salons. It's now no shot, no entry. Aaron Lentz is essentially stuck at home because he doesn't want to get the shot.
I'm basically shut out of society, and I don't think that's a good situation to be in to make a decision. I think everyone should be able to make free decisions, and right now, that's not really possible.
Germany, like many other countries, made vaccines available. They've given you this a long amount of time in order to come to a conclusion that you want to get yourself vaccinated, and you still haven't done it. At this point, it's very difficult to find more proof that vaccines work.
The thing is, I'm a young and healthy guy. And if I look at the numbers, I'm not that convinced that I need the vaccine. And if you put on top of that the government basically trying to force me to take it, then I don't like that outcome.
The president of the European Commission is so worried about vaccine hesitancy that she's considering an even more controversial route.
1/3 of the European population is not vaccinated. These are 150 million people. It is understandable and appropriate to potentially think about mandatory vaccination within the European Union.
What will you do if Germany introduces a vaccine mandate, if they make it the law that you must be vaccinated?
Well, I'd say I would try to ride it out as long as I can. And if it's not possible anymore, then I'd suggest other options, leaving the country or anything.
You'd prefer to leave the country rather than to get vaccinated?
Yeah, honestly, yeah, because I made my decision, and the government trying to force me into it made me basically stand my ground even more.
Mandating vaccines is an ethical and political minefield, especially for the European Union, which prides itself on its liberal democratic values. But like so much else about European politics, COVID has emphasised the deep East-West division on the continent. In countries like Portugal, over 88% of the population has been vaccinated. In Bulgaria, though, it's less than 25%. And even within Germany, people living in Western states seem keener to get the shot, while some of those in the East resist. A COVID Cold War, fed largely by the right.
Studies showed us pretty clearly that the more you're far right, the more you also believe in conspiracy narratives. And we sort of see something like people being part of a team. And the team of the far right decided to deny the facts about this pandemic. And so they kind of have to be against vaccination because that's what their team thinks.
Why are some parts of Europe so happy to get vaccinated and other parts just not?
There are many different factors, but in Central and Eastern Europe, we can see sort of this massive trust deficit in institutions, in the government, which is the health department, which are the scientists. And I think it's a broader mistrust that we've seen throughout the world. But in Central and Eastern Europe, it's sort of a long-standing distrust for many, many years. And that has sort of culminated in extreme vaccine hesitancy.
But right-wing populists do have unlikely allies in their COVID conspiracy crusade, Europe's vast array of libertarians, nonconformists and lovers of alternative medicine. So, what's the answer?
There's no one approach, and you need to target each of those groups very specifically. So, the group that's worried because of health reasons, they need to be targeted for those specific reasons with, very targeted measures.
Some countries aren't waiting, though, for the EU to decide on regulations. Austria will mandate vaccines in the new year. In January, Greece will fine anyone over 60 more than $100 a month if they haven't got their shot. And Italy and France already have vaccine passports. Just weeks ago, Europe looked set for a more festive Christmas than last year. But as the holiday approaches and Omicron looms, uncertainty is spreading.
Now, I don't think there should be much snogging under mistletoe.
James Longman, ABC News, London.
Our thanks to James for that, and be sure to tune in COVID-19 One World, One Pandemic on Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern right here on ABC News Live. Just under 3 months until the Winter Olympics in Beijing, and the White House today announced a diplomatic boycott. What does that mean, and how is China responding? Our chief White House correspondent Cecilia Vega reports.
Calling out China for human rights abuses, the White House today declared neither President Biden nor any other American official will travel to the Beijing Winter Games, a diplomatic boycott.
We will not be contributing to the fanfare of the Games.
American athletes can still compete in February, but the snub sends a strong political message and is a direct response to Beijing's crackdown on pro-democracy and free speech activists in Hong Kong and abuses against Uyghur Muslims. It's the first time Americans have boycotted an Olympics since 1980, when President Jimmy Carter refused to send a delegation to the Moscow Games in protest of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. But Carter kept American athletes home, too, not just officials. Is a diplomatic boycott enough, given the human rights abuses?
We will be rooting for the athletes from home. That does not mean that is the end of the concerns we will raise about human rights abuses in Xinjiang, but this is just sending a message that, given these human rights abuses, we cannot proceed with business as usual.
Rooting for the athletes from home. Our thanks to Cecilia Vega for that. And China is responding tonight, calling the U.S. move a, quote, serious offense to the 1.4 billion Chinese people. We turn next to the FBI's announcement today that they are closing the case in the murder of 14-year-old Emmett Till, who was taken from his family's home 66 years ago and killed over a claim that he insulted a white woman. The FBI had reopened the investigation into Till's death, but now says that they've failed to prove a key witness lied. Tonight, 66 years after the brutal murder of Emmett Till, the Justice Department announcing they have closed their investigation. The family and friends of Till expressing their disappointment today.
We're disappointed that no one has paid for the tragic, brutal murder of a 14-year-old boy for whistling at a white woman.
The department had been looking into whether Carolyn Bryant Donham, the woman who claimed Till had grabbed and allegedly made lewd comments in a Mississippi grocery store, had recanted her previous accounts and if she or others could be prosecuted. The FBI reopened the case in 2017 after historian Tim Tyson claimed in his book that Donham, seen here in a 60 Minutes report from 2004, had taken back some of her allegations. Donham told the FBI she never recanted to Tyson, and today the DOJ concluded that they have not uncovered sufficient evidence to support federal prosecution.
I'm not surprised, but my heart is broken.
It has been a long road of heartbreak for the family of Emmett Till, who lost the 14-year-old in 1955 when Till was taken from the Mississippi home of his great-uncle by Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam, the husband and brother-in-law of Caroline Bryant.
Because we're looking for Fat Boy, the fat boy from Chicago.
Till's cousin, Reverend Wheeler Parker, was there that night.
And that's the last time we saw him.
Emmett Till's tortured body was pulled from the Tallahatchie River 3 days later. Till's grieving mother, Mamie Till Mobley, then made a decision that changed history, holding an open casket funeral for Emmett, her only child, which thousands attended and fueled the civil rights movement. Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam were tried and found not guilty by an all-white jury. A few months later, protected by double jeopardy, they confessed to the murder in a paid interview. Both men have since died. The family tonight quoting scripture saying, "Vengeance is mine, I will pay, saith the Lord." Now to a possible medical breakthrough for millions of people who suffer from type 1 diabetes. It's an uncurable chronic disease that requires patients to take daily insulin injections just to stay alive. But now a new stem cell procedure could change lives. Here's ABC's Will Reeve.
64-year-old Brian Shelton has lived with type 1 diabetes for more than 40 years. 15 years with dangerous episodes of hypoglycemia.
You spend your entire life, every minute of the day, trying to keep track of where your numbers are at. Did I eat? Did I not eat?
Sometimes when his blood sugar dropped, he says he'd lose consciousness without warning.
I shoveled down the snow, and when I got inside the garage, my number crashed, and I went face first into the concrete.
But now Brian's life has changed after becoming the first participant in a groundbreaking new clinical trial.
How do you feel right now?
Right now, great. Just fantastic. I feel like I got released from handcuffs. I'm not sitting here like, where's my orange juice? Where's my pills? Where's my you know, it's like, I don't need them.
Felicia Paliuca heads up the type 1 diabetes program at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Using a discovery made by Harvard professor Dr. Douglas Melton, the pioneering work here targets the root cause of the disease. In people with type 1 diabetes, the body attacks the cells in the pancreas that create insulin. But with this new treatment, the patient receives an infusion of new cells, grown from stem cells, that help to restore the body's natural ability to create and regulate that insulin, essentially giving the body back the cells it lost.
Have you cured type 1 diabetes?
Brian's results are nothing short of remarkable. We've seen improvements in his glucose control, improvements in his need for insulin, improvements in his ability to make insulin on his own because these cells are there. We have a lot of work left to do, but this data gives us great confidence.
Brian says he can now go days without taking insulin and no longer fears those sudden, dangerous crashes.
Now I could do yard work without having to worry about my numbers going too high or too low. All my numbers are right in that line. And just seeing that, you know, makes me feel great. I feel like I'm getting another chance at life.
Could be life-changing for so many. Our thanks to Will for that. And joining us now is Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and columnist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Tony Messenger. Messenger's columns on what have in practice become debtors' prisons in Missouri expose the harsh reality of low-income Americans who commit misdemeanor crimes and then become entrapped in a cycle of being indebted to the criminal justice system in that state. Tony's book, Profit and Punishment: How America Criminalizes the Poor in the Name of Justice, looks at the harsh practices of fines and penalties that can land the poor in jail. Tony, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay.
So in your book, you detail how the Ferguson protests weren't just about the death of Michael Brown, but also about highlighting the issue of oppressive fines and fees in traffic stop cases. How did the Ferguson protests help, in your estimation, bring attention to these practices of municipal courts in Missouri?
I think it raised an issue nationally that a lot of people, myself included, were not really aware of, that a lot of poor Black people, in the case of North St. Louis County, were arrested regularly on minor offenses, most of them traffic-related, ended up owing money for those offenses, sometimes got arrested again if they missed a court hearing, and ended up in jail primarily because they couldn't afford to pay the fines and fees. What I found out in the process of researching my book is that this is a problem all across the country, and it affects poor white people in rural Missouri and Oklahoma and Minnesota and lots of places where it's primarily poor white people, and it affects poor Black people in the cities and in North St. Louis County and in Columbia, South Carolina, where one of the characters of my book, Sasha Darby, lives. It is a massive problem all across the country, and it's basically the criminalization of poverty.
And in what ways do sectors within the criminal justice system benefit from funds generated by municipal courts? How does it help balance municipality budgets?
Well, frankly, I don't think it does very, very much. There has actually been a study in New Mexico that indicates that it costs more for cities and counties to try to collect the revenue that they're seeking than they actually bring in. And the reason for that makes a lot of sense. 80% of the folks who participate in the municipal and county courts happen to be poor. We know that because they qualify for a public defender. And so the cities and counties that are trying to use these schemes, trying to use these fines and fees to balance their budget, are basically charging a backdoor tax to poor people. And when they can't afford to pay them, they end up putting them back in jail.
Can you explain how the so-called pay-to-stay bills operate, and what happens to taxpayer money if detainees have to pay for their bonds themselves?
Yeah, what happens in a lot of states, and this is what I originally wrote a lot of my columns in Missouri about, is that there is actually a statute in every state in the country. New Hampshire recently repealed theirs, but every other state has a statute that allows cities and counties to charge people for jail time. As your viewers can see, I'm sitting here in a hotel in Springfield, Missouri, and I'm going to get a bill for my time in the hotel. Well, jails are doing the same thing, and it's primarily poor people who have to pay, because wealthy people don't spend time in jail on misdemeanors because they can afford their cash bail to get out. And these bills end up costing thousands and thousands of dollars. One of the main people in my book is a woman named Brooke Bergen. She stole an $8 tube of mascara from Walmart in central Missouri. She ended up getting a bill for $15,000 for her time in jail. And the judge used her inability to pay that bill as a threat to put her back in jail over and over again.
And your book also follows the narratives of 3 single women. Why was it so important for you to delve into the female perspective when discussing this aspect of the criminal justice system?
When I first started looking into these cases in Missouri, it just so happens that many of the victims of this scheme were young women, and they were single mothers. And it struck me how incredibly damaging to their lives this criminalization of their poverty was. When a poor, young, single mother gets put in jail because they can't afford to pay their fines and fees, they lose their car, they lose their apartment, they lose their minimum wage job, and often their kids end up in social services or foster care. The incredible harm to these women who cause absolutely no damage to society, who are not a threat to public safety, but are being used as pawns in a scheme to try to raise money for cities and counties. I just thought that was the most compelling story. And it's important to me that as people read this book, they connect to the victims of this scheme. It's important for them to see that this could be their sister, their aunt, their daughter, their mother, who's being abused by the tyranny of government.
And there's been some bipartisan agreement in Missouri that this system, where unpaid fees and penalties can lead to revoked bail and imprisonment, that it's unfair and may even be unconstitutional. So why is it still happening, especially if statistics show that these court fees and the harsh collection tactics don't deter crime, may actually increase crime?
Well, you're right. And one of the things that attracts me to this story is that on the left, you have the ACLU, and on the right, you have the Koch brothers and lots of people in between who understand the idea that using the criminal justice system as a form of wealth extraction is unconstitutional and is a constant violation of civil rights of poor people. The reason it's so hard to undo these schemes is because they are so ingrained in the system. It starts with cash bail. Then you have the underfunded public defender systems. Then you have state legislatures in states where you have lawmakers who won't raise taxes that turn to the courts for fines and fees to raise money for various services. Once you start raising money for those services through the courts, if you try to stop that process, then you're going to have all sorts of constituencies wondering where they're going to get their money from. So it's a very difficult scheme to unravel, but we can start with some simple things. And the most important one is judges defending and protecting the civil rights of the defendants who come before them and not forcing them back into jail because they can't afford to pay the fines and fees that the system is trying to impose upon them.
Tony Messenger, really interesting stuff that you don't hear often people talking about. We thank you so much for your time and insight. Your book, of course, Profit and Punishment, is now available wherever books are sold. And still to come tonight on Prime, honoring the man called one of the greatest generation.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
It was a scary time in the 70s. You had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it, serial killer.
There was a human head in there. This was premeditated evil.
We have this clock. This person is going to do this again.
It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
You never know what you're going to get on this show. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yes, Whoopi!
This mic on? Can you hear me out there?
Behind the scenes is always a better show.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's what people don't see during the commercial break.
Right, they don't.
What happened?
I had no idea really what I was getting myself into.
That day that we walked out, I treasure that day.
I couldn't sit there.
You're doing good, Joy. You're doing good.
Oh, yeah, baby.
It was crazy.
Behind the Table. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
I risked my life. I put my family in danger. If I was caught, they would have put a bullet in my head. But it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do.
Terror plot foiled in Garden City, Kansas.
That would have been one of the most deadly acts of domestic terrorism ever in the United States. It would have been Oklahoma City.
He put his family, himself, in jeopardy for us.
With so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on the tough questions with straightforward reporting. See why Sunday mornings, more Americans are now turning first to ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos.
Welcome to This Week.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
National parks are incredibly safe places. A crime will happen.
Hey, my wife has fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
Welcome back, everyone. We're tracking several headlines around the world. At least 22 people are dead and dozens remain missing after one of Indonesia's most active volcanoes erupted over the weekend. Hot ash and volcanic gas have blanketed entire villages on the island of Java. Rescue workers continue to dig through sludge and debris to try to find survivors. The Indonesian government says that they are preparing a relocation process for the thousands of displaced villagers who lost their homes in the eruption. To Haiti now, where another 3 of the 17 U.S. and Canadian missionaries kidnapped back in October have been released. The American Christian charity group, who the former hostages were on a religious mission with, say all 3 are now safe and seem to be in good spirits. Their release brings the total number of people freed to 5. 12 more group members remain in captivity. And some tense moments for a far-right French presidential candidate moments before his first political rally. Video shows a man lunging toward Eric Zemmour as he headed toward the stage to speak. French media report Zemmour was injured in the attack as other brawls broke out in the crowd between the presidential hopeful supporters and anti-racism activists. And we celebrate the life of former Senator, longtime Republican leader and presidential candidate Bob Dole, who died Sunday at the age of 98. The tributes have been pouring in. President Biden calling Dole among the greatest of the greatest generation. Here's ABC's George Stephanopoulos.
An American hero, Bob Dole dedicated his life to his country, on the battlefield and in the U.S. Senate. Born in 1923 in the small town of Russell, Kansas, Dole grew up to become a star student and athlete. But in 1943, all of that was put on hold. He saw combat in World War II, severely injured while fighting in Italy. Dole's body ripped apart by shrapnel and left for dead. He managed to survive, then return home and start a grueling recovery.
Of all the titles I've had, I tried to get one I didn't get, but the one I'm most proud of is the title of veteran.
Dole's right arm would never heal, a constant reminder of war. It would fuel his fight for those with disabilities. A key player in enacting the Americans for Disabilities Act in 1990. And with his second wife, Elizabeth, Dole later established a foundation to help care for wounded warriors. The pair were a political powerhouse, 2 of the most respected figures in Washington.
I may be a little biased as her senator and her husband, but when George Bush talked about the 1,000 points of light, he probably had Elizabeth in mind.
During his career in Congress, Dole helped usher in an era of bipartisanship on issues like civil rights and the social safety net. His star rose quickly, chairman of the RNC. He joined the presidential ticket with Gerald Ford as a vice presidential candidate, then Senate Majority Leader. Later, after launching multiple failed runs for president, Dole finally won the Republican nomination in 1996, facing off against President Clinton. That race quickly turned Bob Dole into a pop culture staple. He made several late-night appearances, poking fun at his persona.
I don't run around saying Bob Dole does this and Bob Dole does that. That's not something Bob Dole does.
And while Dole lost the race, he never lost his sense of humor. When President Clinton awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom just months after the election, Dole was able to laugh at his own defeat, pretending to be sworn in at the White House.
I, Robert J. Dole. Do solemnly swear. Sorry, wrong speech.
Overnight tributes poured in. President Biden called Dole a friend whom I could look to for trusted guidance or a humorous line at just the right moment to settle frayed nerves. And President Clinton tweeted, Bob Dole dedicated his entire life to serving the American people. After all he gave in the war, he didn't have to give more, but he did. His example should inspire people today and for generations to come.
So I leave you all tonight with a full heart and a fervent prayer that we will meet again and we will meet often. In this land where miracles are always happening, where every day is a new beginning and every life a blessing from God. Thank you for all you've done and all you will do in the future for America. Thank you very much, and God bless America.
We thank George for that tribute to Bob Dole. And tonight, USA Today published Bob Dole's final op-ed. We will end our show with some of the final words that Dole put to paper just days before he died. He said, quote, Too many of us have sacrificed too much in defending that freedom from foreign adversaries to allow our democracy to crumble under a state of infighting that grows more unacceptable by the day. Take it from Eisenhower and the dwindling band of brothers who fought under his command. Together, we must learn how to compose differences, not with arms, but with intellect and decent purpose. Bob Dole was 98 years old. And that is our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We leave you tonight with a look at the White House, where flags are at half-staff in commemoration of Bob Dole. Have a good night.